Welcome to the Village podcast. I am your host, Nicole. My why has always been to empower women and amplify the voices of mothers. We created the Village to share stories and ideas to embody the innate wisdom of a village, but on a modern day platform. I hope this podcast inspires, educates, and informs you and brings you the joy, love, and light you deserve. Welcome to the Village. Hi, everybody. Today we have a very special guest, Sydney Porter, on our podcast. She is like an earth angel, goddess woman who really embodies that grounded, divine feminine. And I'm so excited to hear about all of your perspectives and experiences around birthing and postpartum. You're also a birth educator and doula, and you look at things from a very holistic perspective. So welcome to the Village.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, very excited for our conversation today to just ground and connect and talk motherhood and all the things, birth, postpartum, pregnancy, and just really the woman's journey. Yeah.
Yeah. You had your first baby at 19 and you're about to become a mother of two.
Yes.
How does that feel?
The word I could use is wild. It's like not what I ever planned for my life.
Tell me about that. What do you mean? What did you plan?
Well, I considered like, okay, I'll have children around maybe closer to 30, 28, 29, maybe like 26 if I'm feeling ambitious, starting that journey early. But my husband and I, we had a house together in Atlanta, and I was on birth control for a long time. Well, I can't say a long time. For a few years, I was on birth control, and I just had really been diving very deep into my work with the earth and connecting a lot more with the earth spirits, recognizing like that I was starting kind of like a journey that was leading me somewhere, and I wasn't really sure where that was yet, but I knew that I felt really called to stop taking birth control because I felt that it was essentially like putting my womb to sleep. And in a lot of the like messages that I'd been receiving just from the earth is that there's like the earth is like a womb, and there's so much wisdom within the womb. And the fact that like I wasn't really connecting to mine, I was taking the pill and I wasn't having cycles. And so it was like I was just really out of alignment with like the natural rhythm that women had been experiencing and learning from and really rooting in for like millions of years.
Yeah.
So
was the pill that you were taking stopping your period? Like I know that there are some pills that stop it, and then there's some that have sugar pills for 5 days, I think.
Yeah. I basically was like, I always wonder, doctors are just people regardless of how much authority we give them, And so the doctor that I was seeing, the gynecologist, she was like, yeah, it's totally fine if you just like take the actual effective hormonal pill,
right,
and just choose to not have your periods. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So I did that for a long time and I didn't really question it. I was also young, like very young, I started, I might have only been on the pill for like a year and a half, so I'm grateful that it wasn't like a really prolonged, like, I still know some women are on the pill for like 10 years or like 15 years, 20 years before they stop and have children. But, so I wasn't having cycles essentially like at all, Yeah.
And so you kind of reached a point where you're like, I don't want to do this at all anymore. And it's so interesting what you say about the female cycle. We really don't honor the gifts from that cycle and the teachings and the wisdom. I read this book recently. It's a really short read, which is awesome for like moms because who has time? It's called Do Less by Kate Northrup. And it talks about how women should kind of organize their whole month based on their cycle. So this is when you should be social. This is when you should be like in a kind of cocoon space. This is when you should come up with your ideas and based on like the moon and how your cycle is affecting you emotionally, physically. And she talks about how to like make your life more efficient by kind of playing off the different kind of periods throughout your cycle, if that makes sense. And so I'm curious about like the wisdom that you felt like you were missing out on and that you've learned since. So can you share that with us?
Yes, definitely. So it's so funny. In this journey, I stopped taking the pill, and my cycles are like, they take a good couple months to regulate. I mean, essentially what I noticed is that my cycles didn't really regulate because I thought they were regulating and I was actually pregnant.
Wow. So as soon as you went off it, you got pregnant.
Yeah, pretty much. Like maybe I had like 2 or 3 actual like full cycles, like actual bleeds. And then I was pregnant, and I just like, I didn't know I was pregnant with my first until I was 17 weeks.
Wow.
So I was almost halfway, and I definitely chalk that up to thinking that like, okay, this is normal that I'm not having a period for this amount of time because my body's just regulating from coming off the pill. But in reality, there, like was a whole baby in my womb, just hanging out, waiting to be uncovered. And, so that was very wild. So
were you having pregnancy symptoms at this point?
Not really.
No. Was your first a boy or a girl?
Girl.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So yeah, I wasn't having, when we were in our like initial first 8 weeks of pregnancy or so, we were in Mexico for my birthday. And it was just like a lot of things that I was writing off to being in a different environment. Like I was like slightly nauseous, like, and I just thought, oh, it's hot.
Yeah.
And like the food is different.
Yeah.
And we're traveling a lot. So, like my stomach is more upset, but I never had like any like vomiting and like those really like early pregnancy symptoms that are like clear telltale signs. None of that. And I wasn't showing at all either. So it was very shocking. I just thought that there was something strange going on, like within my womb. Right. And so I'm like, okay, I don't want to go to a doctor unless I really, really need to. So I decided to go and like get a really high quality pregnancy test done, like better than like an at-home test. For whatever reason, I felt like I needed something that was just so definite and sure in that way.
Yeah.
And so I went and got a pregnancy test done. And of course they're like, yes, you're pregnant. And I'm like, literally just like immediately sobbing and just so many emotions and so much immediate grief and just lots of like, I was 19. So I felt like simultaneously a lot of shame and just a lot of anxiousness and worrying about the judgment of other people and things. And so I sat there in that doctor's office for like at least an hour, and my husband's like in the lobby and he's like, what's taking so long?
Know yet?
No.
Wow.
So I go out there and I'm like, he sees what I look like and he's like, what is, like what happened? And he's like, I'm pregnant, and he's just like, he's trying to gauge how to react based off of like how I'm reacting. Yeah. But really quickly after we leave the doctor's office, I'm just like, I sober up and I'm like, we need to get an ultrasound right now because I have no idea when we conceived, Yeah. So we go and do an ultrasound literally like 30 minutes later. I just call this random clinic and I'm like, hi,
Great. So,
let's like do this. And she
by the way, people, you can do this. So a lot of doctors or like your care provider will say you can't have an ultrasound because it's not under your insurance, blah blah blah. They won't see you. For my first pregnancy, I'd just call random ultrasound places and go whenever I wanted because I didn't want to have that constraint. So if you feel like you want to go get an ultrasound, you can go and get one.
Yes, definitely.
From places elsewhere than your care provider.
Yes. So she puts like the ultrasound jelly on and then puts the machine on there. And we literally are all just like, because it's, she's like a fingers and toes baby, like not just little seed, but like whole baby. And I am like not at all showing it in any way. And we were just so shocked. But in that moment, everything that I felt about like the shame and the grief, the anxiety, the concern, the judgment, it just literally melted away. And I was like, just elated to start planning for this new life. And also in a way, I feel that the ignorance of being young and just like not really knowing what you're going into fully helps a lot.
Yeah.
It was just like, this will be wonderful. Like it'll be challenging, but also amazing. And
it sounds also like your husband was very just like open to it and present with you, like letting you lead.
Yes. Yeah, essentially he was extremely open to it. I mean, when we first met, he was like, I always wanted to be a father, so like, we were like, yeah, we'll plan definitely for children, but we ended up, the children kind of planned for us instead.
Were you guys married at this point?
No.
How long had you been dating?
Maybe like a year and a half. Yeah. So it was quick.
But did you know when you met him that he was going to be
the
father of your kids?
It's funny, the way that we met, it took me like a while to warm up to him. He was instantly very like attracted to me, very into me. And I was like, we're friends, but really like, I think maybe in a week's time, I came around to the idea of us being like in a romantic relationship. And then from there, we were quite literally inseparable. And I was in school in San Diego at the time and we met in Atlanta. So I ended up having to go back to school once the summer was over. And so it was like a summer romance,
Yeah.
And I just was like, I don't think I can do this, like be in school and like be this far apart. And there were a lot of other factors too. Like school was not for me. I felt like I could benefit more from just being in the world and like experiencing.
Yeah.
And so I left school and then we got that house together and that's where we conceived my daughter. So it just kind of like all happened really quickly, really quickly. We talk about that a lot, how it's only been like 5 years since we've been together and we have 2 children. And like, it's just kind of mind blowing in a way, the timeline has just been short, but it feels like it's a whole lifetime in itself, Yeah.
So at what point did you really like start diving into the wisdom of, is this the point where you really started your education around like, motherhood and being pregnant and postpartum?
Yes, 100%. When we found out we were pregnant, I was literally petrified by the idea of giving birth. And like in my upbringing, there was just no real like talk of birth, and no talk of like cycles and of the womb. And of course, in a way, I'm grateful for that because this was something that I was meant to dive into on my own, but yeah, I mean, I was so afraid to give birth, but I knew that who I am as a person is really rooted in like gentleness and like peace, compassion, like holistic ways of being. And especially I knew that I wanted that for my birth. And so I knew that I wouldn't be comfortable going to a hospital. So what I kind of deducted after a week of just kind of going back and forth in my mind about it was that there's something here that I'm not aware of. Like there's something here, there's more to this story that I haven't been told yet. And so I essentially committed myself in that pregnancy to uncovering as much truth about birth that I possibly could, and really just looking at all of the ways that women have been lied to,
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I ended up having like a really wonderful natural birth like I wanted with my daughter.
Yeah, at home.
Well, no, I had a birth center birth for her.
Okay.
Yeah. So since we found out so late, and I also feel like I just, one, didn't have like a lot of resources that I was aware of. And 2, I felt like I really wanted to do a home birth, but I also felt that for her birth, I kind of needed a middle ground, like my education of birth work began in that pregnancy, but it's evolved so much.
Yeah.
So much. Like I educated myself to a point where I felt like I knew what I needed to know in order to birth the way I wanted. Yeah. But after I was kind of like out of that birth portal, like that container of pregnancy, I really dove into just like all of the nuance, all of the perspective, all that there is within the reality of birth, and motherhood and postpartum and just the whole experience of like bringing life into the world, Yeah.
Yeah. So I think a birthing center is a really nice middle ground for anyone that's going through it the first time, because the first time is really your body's kind of creating that pathway. No, it all depends on, it really depends on the person.
Yes.
It's kind of like I was talking to Dr. Berlin about it, and it's like wherever you feel the safest.
Right.
So some people feel the safest in a hospital and the most comfortable in a hospital. Some people feel the safest and the most comfortable at home. So it's really like digging into your like inner wisdom and knowledge and figuring out where you feel safest and why. But hopefully, like, as you said, doing your own research, because there are doctors and professionals out there, but we can't always put 100% all of our trust in them. We also have to have accountability, because at the end of the day, it's like we're making decisions for ourselves and we're the best person to do that. This episode is brought to you by Bumpsuit, the modern company redefining maternity and beyond. As a mom of 3, I've tried every single baby carrier on the market, and at Bumpsuit, we came up with the best baby carrier out there. We took all the problems from the baby carriers we loved and we solved them in this one baby carrier called the Armadillo. The Armadillo has a lot of different pockets for your phone, your keys. It even has a space for your water bottle to hang from. It has a weather cover. It's got a back lumbar for that support, especially after giving birth. It is great for newborns up until, my 3.5-year-old still asks for it. Go to bumpsuit.co. That's bumpsuit.co. Use the code THEVILLAGE20 for 20% off your entire order and get an Armadillo baby carrier. Do yourself a favor. So you had your first baby. How was your postpartum experience after that?
Postpartum was interesting. It was very interesting. I like moving through this pregnancy and just having more resources within like the birth work community, gives me a lot more perspective and understanding of what a postpartum experience could look like. When I was pregnant with my daughter Vea, I felt like I planned really well for postpartum, but they're just...
How did you plan?
So
what were you doing?
I made a postpartum plan, and I shared it with all of my, all the immediate women that I knew would be hands-on, all of the grandmothers, essentially.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is what we're going to need. We need food. We're going to have these supplies on deck at all times. And we're going to aim to be, very quiet, very still. I'm going to be resting for probably a month straight. And, there were just a lot of things, that we wanted to keep very gentle for the sake of a smooth integration for, our daughter and for myself as well. But, I made, which in retrospect, I realized was not necessarily the most supportive to the physiology of the body, but I made these postpartum pads that I basically froze with different, herb water, teas,
a pad for your perineum. And
because there's so much bleeding postpartum for, a long time.
So what kind of teas?
So I used, witch hazel, which is awesome. And I used comfrey, lavender. I may or may not have also used sage. Yeah. I have it all written down because I kept the postpartum plan. I was like, of course, for the memories, gotta have it,
That's a great resource.
Yes. So I made the plan, but of course, there's the lovely saying, people plan and God laughs. And so the plan, I just feel that I could have communicated a little more thoroughly and definitively when it came to just my family members about how much support we would need. Yeah. And it's I don't blame them, because most people in their lives don't really choose like the study of mothers and birth as their like thing, as their niche, you know? So people are only, in a way, family members and friends are only as educated about a thing as you really kind of lean into with them. So like we had support hands-on in the house for like a week. And then, you know, there was just kind of like all right, you've got it. See you. And I'm like,
You're like, I said a month of rest.
Yeah.
In my plan.
Yes. And I think there's also just this idea that the father is supposed to pick up and fill in all the gaps, like all the gaps, you know, and it's not realistic in any way. And I think that people in a way don't really have the understanding or like certain level of respect for the father's journey as well, because they're not physically going through the process of like birth and breastfeeding and postpartum, but they're there for all of it. And it's still really valid that it's a big transition for them.
Yeah.
You know,
they've also had a rebirth.
Yeah.
Everyone has, you know, not having community around is really hard. Not having family around is really hard. So like really just finding your tribe during that time and leaning on them and asking for help. And also like if you're around a woman that's given birth, like really making an effort and taking the time to really just even drop a meal off or go in for an hour and do some laundry or hold the baby for a second so the mom can shower. Like we really need to be aware of this as a community. So mothers aren't feeling as isolated as they are today.
Exactly.
And being like, I'm fine. And when the visitors come over, it's like, they're smiling, they're holding the baby, but they're inside just dying.
Yeah.
Because it's like we're set up for failure. This is not the way we're meant to be doing this.
Right. Yeah.
You
I mean,
know?
entirely so. And it's like, we spoke briefly before we, you know, jumped into the podcast about the origins of why we are living the way we're living right now, you know, especially in the realm of life creation, motherhood, birth, family dynamics, you know, community support. And it's like the original people, all of the original societies were deeply communal, like in the way where, you know, there is a shared responsibility for all of the children, because also in these societies, they were primarily like polygamous, you know? And so there was just like a general understanding and agreement, like, hey, we're not 100% sure every time who the father's going to be. So every man shows up in the father role. Yeah. You know, and like everyone puts in equal effort to raise the children because this is like the future generation of our whole community. Yeah. You know? And actually when the shift went from kind of like nomadic communal living to agriculture, and people realized, you know, oh, we can grow things for ourselves. We can settle. We don't have to move around so much. You know, it went from these societies where there's a lot of focus on like the worship of the woman, the worship of the womb, the worship of like the vulva. You know, there's so many like cave paintings and sculptures created that really glorify like the woman and, you know, almost paint the womb and the woman's ability to kind of like be the portal to bring children through as like an aspect of a deity, you know, like a true goddess. And
I just got goosebumps.
And that's our origins, like for all people.
We are all goddesses.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Like literally. And then we look at, you know, people realize they can settle, they can farm, you know, we can grow things and we can keep animals and we don't have to hunt and go out and try to collect our food every day. There's a level of ease that comes with that, you know, like there's not such a high level of need to do so much to survive, right? Which is great. But also now there is ownership. And there has never been ownership before. Right. And
people are splitting into communities at this point.
Right, right. And what's interesting here is with the idea of ownership, this plays in two very big ways. One, that the land and the crops and the livestock and the house, you know, all of these things, all of the things that people are now possessing are being passed on to the son, or I mean, essentially the children in general, right? And so now there's a need to know, who are my children definitively, you know?
Right.
And so with the woman's body, this plays into kind of like, it could be subtle or overt, but this sense of ownership over the woman's body coming from the man of the household.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, in this regard, everything kind of starts here. And this is where we see sort of like this separation of people, you know, because it's like, this is mine, this is yours, this is my family, this is your family. I care for my own, you care for your own. And people are still living in community. There's still like a sense of kinship, you know, there's still the village, but it's not the same, you know, it's not like as truly connected as it once was. And then from there, it just kind of like develops along this timeline.
So I heard like, I don't know if you know who Dr. Stan Tatkin is, but he talks about the next stage from there was that the ownership, as you said, of the father and the kinship would start arranging marriages with their daughters and sons so that the level of ownership remained heightened. So if you owned a lot, you would marry into a family that owned a lot. And if you didn't, then you didn't. And so that took place. And then people started, like, daughters and sons started going against that and saying, we want to choose our own, you know, partners in life, because there was not like true love there. And then so we've really kind of evolved into a state where we get to choose our own. And but it really creates isolation, right? In a way. But yeah, continue on this journey.
Yes. So we look at, you know, moving out of just discovering agriculture and, you know, how communities develop from there. In this way, birth for women is still centered around the woman, right? Like birth for women is still attended by women. It's attended by family members, you know, and close friends and like people that the woman is just close to in the community. And there are these wise women who are essentially the ones who care for the mothers and who catch the babies. And, you know, birth is still in the woman's hands essentially at this point. But still under this new perspective of less freedom in a way, you know?
Yeah.
And then out of here, it's like moving more into, fast forward several thousand years, we get to what everyone popularly knows as like the Salem witch trials. And I speak from the perspective of all of the events that primarily took place within, you know, European culture, because this is what dominates the planet essentially, you know? And so it has the greatest impact over everything. Like if we were speaking specifically on the timeline of Africa, it looks a little different, or like the timeline of, you know, Asian countries, it looks different. But because, you know, the European influence is what has created, you know, essentially like the systems that we live in. So Salem witch trials, this all kind of began when men created schools, and they essentially wanted to capitalize financially off of being educated and being educated as a doctor by the standards of whatever university they went to. And so, you know, like rightfully so, you put in the time and the effort. And what was happening here is that men wanted to be within the birth space, you know, and like receive business and money from birthing families. But there was still this goddess worship actually happening, you know, within the culture, and still this practice of birth that is centered around women and around the wise women, you know, and around the families. And this was just not something that these very fresh on the scene OBs were cool with, you know? They were like, we're losing out on literally all of this business. And the midwives, the wise women, they were really affordable, and they people knew them in the community. They had a reputable history of showing up at birth, knowing what herbs to use, knowing what rituals to do. And so essentially what happens is all of these doctors go to the church and they're like, hey, these women are working with all of this magical stuff, they're doing rituals and they're using plants, and these are witches, and it's essentially witch means wise woman. So they're like, these women are witches and we think that they should be regulated and that they need to meet up to certain requirements and standards in order to practice as a midwife. So they put all these restrictions and they're like, if you do not comply with this, then essentially you are deemed a witch and we will come find you, And so that was the first really big moment of taking birth away from the woman,
And wisdom.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yes, yes.
I feel like there's this ancient wisdom that's not getting passed down to us. It's been stopped, and where is this wisdom that's being passed down? And I always wondered what were witches? And now, even in my household, I don't use any products from the store. I use essential oils to clean my home and natural. I want to find the wisdom that didn't get passed down to me, and I want to be able to share it. And I think that's why we're here today. And it's beautiful that you're touching on this. So please go ahead. Yeah.
And it's the wisdom, it's really powerful because we as women are actually connected through our maternal line, through our wombs, and all of the history, all of the experience, all of the wisdom is there, within our bodies, and it's just about us having the capacity to look at where the things that we have kind of deemed as normal are not actually normal, and they're not actually serving our well-being. And removing those things allows us to hear the voices of our ancestors and to tap into that bodily wisdom, and remember the secrets that were kept out of fear, of being persecuted. And so, essentially these women are some of the things that the restrictions were put on them were along the lines of you can't use herbs at birth, and you can't use certain rituals at birth. You can't bring certain statues to birth or deities. And, it just really, really altered the practice for a lot of midwives. And there were those, of course, that practiced in secret and still kept doing the things that they knew worked for women. But over time, essentially this came almost to a total halt, and from there we fast forward another few thousand years, and people have spread out much more over the globe, and America has been transformed into kind of what we start to know it as now. And then the same is happening in Europe, where there's a lot of industrialization, and so people are building cities, and there's a lot more people in a very small amount of space. And so this is when we see that hospitals are developed, and they're for the purpose of being able to care for a lot of people in a small amount of space at one time. And at this point, for most people, the mother-centric, woman-centric method of birth is almost pretty much gone. And where people have been conditioned to put their reliance and their faith is within the doctors, And so people start birthing in hospitals. And it's really unsafe initially. Really? Yes, because there's not a lot of regulation. And so doctors are early hospitals are so different from what we know now. Yeah, doctors are going from dead bodies essentially to the open portal of the womb, and there's not any understanding of sanitation in the same way. Yes. And so there's a lot of infection, there's a lot of maternal death, there's a lot of infant death. And yet people are still doing it because they're seeking to fill the hole that's there, you know, that was once filled by the wise woman wisdom, by the community, and like it's gone.
Yeah.
And so what support do you have now, you know? And so, yeah, this essentially continues regardless of the fact that the births in the hospital are not great initially. People still go. And this essentially just becomes the norm in the West, in the Western world. And then here we are now where I see a big shift happening. But I also feel that within my reality, it's like everyone kind of lives in their own dome, you know? And so sometimes it's hard to gauge like how big of a movement is this, or is this just like within my own sphere of experience and influence?
Yeah.
But I feel that there's a big radical shift happening in the world of birth and the way that we understand birth. And I think, we are returning to this more like full spectrum mindset around it, you know, about family creation, and like really recognizing that like when we have children, we're not just having like a baby, you know, like it's like, oh, so sweet, the baby's coming, and like so excited for the baby. But like we're also creating an entire person that will be the next generation. And
for sure.
Yeah, like will be the decision makers, will be the ones that are running the world, you know, after we're gone.
Yeah, I have like crazy goosebumps because like that's why we're doing this podcast and why we're talking about this. And, you know, as I'm filming these podcasts and recording them, I'm really understanding collectively the people that I'm talking to, who I find are very aware, and I'm very neutral on hospital, home birth. Really bringing back that wisdom and knowledge is kind of why we're here. But I also, there's this really big roadblock that we're up against, right? And that is, if you do want a home birth, insurance ain't going to pay for it.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy to me because it costs around $10,000 to have a birth at home. And then if you want like postpartum doula care, which I recommend to everybody if you're having a home birth or a hospital birth, that's even more expensive. And that's kind of the age that we live in. So insurance is not acknowledging home birth, which most people can't afford it. So is it only for wealthy people? And how are we bringing awareness to that and getting around that? Because I think that's like a really big problem. I think both should be acknowledged. And if you feel one is a more conducive environment for you to safely bring a child into the world, you should be able to have financial support on both ends.
Right. Exactly. And it's like, it's so tough, you know, because with my daughter, you know, we were at the birth center. And so our birth was 100% covered by insurance. Yeah. You know, and it was like, we didn't think one time about how are we going to fund just like letting the human that we made on our own without anyone's help, that I grew by myself, exit out of my body in a way that I feel comfortable, you know? And I think the fact that, that women pay to birth the babies that they grow on their own is really wild in the first place. But on the flip side, I do believe in like really fair and equal exchange and compensation for people that are attending births, you know? Yeah. So what I feel is like in this pregnancy, we had chosen a midwife. Yeah. And it was going to be like around $7,000 out of pocket. And that just wasn't plausible. Yeah. And, you know, being hit with what seemed like such a great limitation was just like, why is the system set up like this? One. And then two, what can we do about this here? And like, how many other people are also facing this? And so it's like, all right, time to do research, time to find what's out there. And especially in LA, the cost of a home birth, I feel, is exponentially higher than any other place in the US, you know, like, cause we were considering moving around, going to, we're from Georgia originally. So going back home to Georgia or, you know, pretty much anywhere else. My mom is in Mexico, so we thought about going to Mexico for the birth. And in Georgia, the average cost of a midwife is like $4,000 out of pocket. In Mexico, it's like $1,500 out of pocket, you know? And so here it's just like, okay, I get it. This is a city. The potential to make money here is a lot higher, but still, even for families that are still doing okay financially,
that's a lot of money.
It's still a lot, right? There's a lot of resources for funding when it comes to home births. You know, there's a lot of collectives that actually offer loans for home births. And there are some organizations that will basically just fund a home birth outright, you know, without needing any money paid back regardless. But there needs to be more, you know, because like families deserve to birth how they want to birth, regardless of if they have the financial capability to pay for it or not.
Yeah. And I know like, and to our audience, we'll put those resources in the notes. But I know for you, for this birth that you're approaching, it was too late for you to engage with those resources, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then you started a GoFundMe page.
I did.
Which I think is so awesome because that's really embracing the village attitude digitally, which is so cool. And so you started a GoFundMe and then an organization is now working with you on your home birth. And can you talk about that a little bit? Yes,
definitely. So the GoFundMe, I think it's funny because through there, I've really been able to see that the community is so alive and well. And there's so many people that really believe in the power of community.
Yeah.
And just like the power of honoring the experience of other people and like recognizing that it's totally valid and very human to ask for help, you know? And so that was so beautiful, just receiving so much love from putting the GoFundMe out there. But, the organization, the birth collective that we're working with right now is called Sugar Heal. And essentially they are funded, by the Black Maternal Health Fund. So basically their team is highly comprehensive, like as far as birth care. Their care includes chiropractic, acupuncture, sound healing, the midwife, the doula, postpartum meals.
Wow.
Like, and I think that there's like more that I'm forgetting, but, it's like very all inclusive, you know? And
are they national?
No, they're only based in LA.
LA. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Only based in LA. But essentially, I love it because the family gets really outstanding care and it's not to the detriment of anyone, you know?
Yeah.
Because the whole birth team is being fully compensated for, you know, by the Black Maternal Health Fund. So like everyone gets to operate out of a place of being truly supported.
That's amazing.
You know? And it's like really phenomenal and so inspiring. And, you know, there's that at least.
I love it.
It gives me hope, you know?
Yeah. We do this segment, maybe we can touch on it now, where, you know, we as a business wanted to touch mothers directly. We have this little grant called Bumps in the Road, and we pay it forward to mothers in need. We have like a little offering that we pay forward, and we felt like that was really helpful for our community. And I know you have somebody that you've chosen to pay it forward to.
Yes, I had. It's funny because I had like a couple people in mind, but yes, essentially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about her?
Yes. So the work that she does really embodies all that we mothers in the modern day are actually seeking and searching for, like having that community to lean on in times when you really need it.
Yeah.
And this is one of the times for her, I feel that, you know, like she needs community support. And she's going through a separation right now. And so, you know, she's a new single mom with a 2-year-old. And then also recently was told that the lease on her house was shorter than she actually realized. And so basically she had like a week's notice to just move and find like a whole new place to live with her child by herself.
Wow.
Yeah. So, when I saw that we were going to be donating to someone, I was like, well, obviously this is
this is the person.
She came to mind first.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, she's a really incredible woman, also works in the field of, plant medicine as well, and speaks a lot about like specifically, microdosing psilocybin for mothers and how beneficial that is to just like, like reconnect.
That's a whole other episode.
Yes. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, entirely.
Yeah.
So beneficial for the brain and just like opening up new pathways, becoming just like more present, more compassionate, more like aware in the journey of motherhood. And then also for yourself, rediscovering who you are in the midst of like postpartum and things. And
that sounds beautiful and wonderful. It's like I really feel like herbs and plants can really help us connect with our kind of inner wisdom, inner knowing, like our root, and also just create like a presence in our spirit to be like acknowledging what is happening in front of us.
Yes.
And not distracted by the noise of society. It's like, it's really beautiful. And I love how with plant journeys and plants and herbs and, the good ones, it's becoming okay now again. It's not like it's seen as a negative. It's seen as a positive. Like I haven't done a plant journey myself, but there is a mother that I know that asked me to come on one. And I was like, I'm just too busy. I would have done it by now for sure, multiple times, but I'm so busy. And she's done it like 3 times. And then she's taken her daughter with her to do it a couple of times. And it's not a like aggressive journey. It's not like a ayahuasca or a peyote situation. But I think there's so many beautiful things coming out of that now. And I think people are starting to learn a lot more about it and the incredible benefits of it.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to share with you that we will also be giving you a donation as well. Because I am just obsessed with you on so many levels. And
Thank you.
We also wanted to be a little part of your journey and just help you on your way to becoming a family of 4.
Thank you. That is so sweet and so generous of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind.
Yeah.
Like, truly, you have no idea.
You recently also have to move house.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's so funny because like I felt, of course, called to donate to her because we literally just did the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're like, it's funny because I feel so much more settled and grounded than I think I literally ever have in my whole life. Yeah. And yet if I, showed you my current life on paper, it's just like the most uncertain, like seemingly unknown.
Yeah.
And, it's like this pregnancy has been just like a series of initiations.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've been wondering the whole time, like, why am I experiencing these things?
Yeah.
And it took several months for me to shift out of that perspective of like, these things are happening to me, to like really, really, really being aware of the fact that all of these challenges are asking me to essentially expand myself, to like increase my limits, and like, now I'm at a place where internally I am just so grounded, and just
it's
like
not these things are happening to me. These things are happening for me.
Right.
Like, I don't think I've ever gone through something challenging in my life that hasn't improved my quality of life and my awareness and my intelligence. And it's like, if we can try and look at challenges as teachings and see what can I learn from this?
Right.
Where's the teaching? Because there's always a lesson, always. And it's so beautiful. It's such a gift.
Yeah. Such a gift.
It's like such a gift.
Everything we experience is so purposeful.
Yeah.
It's so purposeful. And like recently I've been revisiting this idea of, it's so funny. in so many children's shows and movies, I feel like there's the narrative painted of like good versus evil. Like there's always good and bad. And like that programming is so deep for most of the world, you know, and really just like sitting with myself and feeling out like, does this feel true? Like, does this feel like this came from me, you know? And recognizing that like how I actually feel is that things just are, you know, and there's challenge and there's grace, you know, and there's a lot to be learned from both, you know? And
that's interesting that you bring that up, because as an adult, I have 3 kids, and watching them, sometimes I will sit and watch something with them and I feel really uncomfortable. And I also feel like a lot of these like things that they're watching are so inappropriate.
Yes.
Like the Lion King and, you know, just things that are like, wow, this is really scary and really dark. And, you know, I know that there's I think there's another perspective to this and the way we're looking at this. There's definitely light and darkness in the world, and we need to really emphasize and be bearers of light. There needs to be a lot of light in this world put into this world, because there's so much darkness. But framing that from a young age is kind of like, is this a good time to start exposing them to this?
Yeah.
Because it's quite scary to watch as an adult. So I was like, how was I processing this as a child?
Right.
And how did that inform the way that I related to things throughout my childhood? You know, it's a very sensitive time.
Yeah. There's so much unpacking to do there. There's so much, just like, especially like with like our children being young at this time where they have access to streaming, you know?
Yeah.
And just there's such a wide vault of media that exists. And like I've been noticing, you know, of course, like any parent, we're really regulated with what we allow my daughter to see.
Yeah.
But, you know, being so like censored about what she watches, it makes me think about like my own childhood. And I recognize it was kind of funny to me when I noticed that my favorite movie when I was a kid, oddly enough, was The Sound of Music. And like, you know, I would just watch this on VHS like all day.
Yeah.
And I noticed that as an adult, what I was programmed with essentially from The Sound of Music shows up a lot. Like,
how does that show up for you?
It's in the funniest ways. Like when I envision my dream home, it's literally in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And it's just a house on the top of a hill in a giant meadow.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know, I only really like to wear very long dresses. Like, you know, recently I've been shopping for aprons and I'm like, what in the, you know, and it's like nowhere else in my life do I feel like this, you know, stems from there. But yeah.
We really have to be careful what we're exposing our children to, and also like what, you know, what we're feeding into our embodies. Like it's our diet too. Like it's like like wisdom and knowledge and hearing, and you know, who you're speaking to, who you're choosing to speak to, what you're choosing to watch, what you're choosing to listen to. It's like all of it is a diet for our soul. And yeah, we really have to be aware of what we're taking in.
Right. And like awareness is key here because, you know, I think about this so much. Today, the drive up here, it was long, but not crazy. It was like 35 minutes. And I took the streetway, and driving through LA is always like having your subconscious mind being bombarded with like millions of images.
Yes.
You know, and it's like, gradually as the ride continues on, like I just get more and more overstimulated, you know, and just feel like I need to close my eyes because I'm just like seeing so much at one time. And, you know, it's like for people that choose to live in an environment that like we know is not really conducive to our overall well-being, like we have to have safeguards for ourselves in place, you know, and like really be aware of our own bodies, really be very present with our own bodies and take note of like, what can I do to balance out and like counteract all the things that I just experienced from living where I live, you know? And it's like, it's really unfortunate in a way that we have to be like so protective and so vigilant against just the environment that we're in because of, you know, whatever work we do. Like I'm here because I model, you know, and like I brought my whole family out here because I model, and like, you know, all the time I'm just like, should we just move to the jungle?
Yeah.
Just like go live in the forest.
And I also find this like when you go into a supermarket with a child and it's like everything is on child level. That's like candy and this and toys. And it's like, you're literally manipulating my child because this is not good for them. And I'm very aware. I'm like, why can't I have this candy? Because I love you. I really care about you. And that's poison. Yeah. And, you know, it's a balance is okay if you want to have it once in a blue moon. And they're like, Mommy, is the moon blue yet? And I'm like, it's just, you know, but just being really like intentional and aware and being like, sugar is really bad for you, and telling them what it does. And like all of this candy here, I tell my kids, I'm like, this candy is put at kid level. Do you see that? Yeah. And I make them aware, and I'm like, this is put here for you to want, to ask me for. It's not like good for you. Right. But it's like manipulative. And I don't know if that's a good word to tell my kids, but I'm trying to look for a different word. But it's like basically like we're living in, you know, this environment that's really not conducive to us growing up as like really healthy, aware beings that are set up for success.
And the crazy thing is like, I love that you use the reference of children in a store, and there's all these things that are like, they look so enticing and so tempting, and they're packaged so well. And like people are like, yes. There's a whole team behind designing the packaging to make it look really enticing. And then also in our realities, we are all children too. And everything that we see out there is made at our eye level. And like, it's all tempting and enticing and like, you know, just creating desire within people that is not innately there, you know? Yeah. And like basically placing seeds for people to think about things that they wouldn't normally think about, you know? Sure. And it's like, this isn't bad. What if we did this in a way that was really conducive for our well-being? Yeah. What if like the billboards were like,
we put peaches, bright colored peaches with like peaches on organic, woohoo, on eye level for kids. Right. We did a billboard in New York recently, and it was meant to be our baby carrier, which is amazing and so helpful for moms on so many levels. Yes. Like we have to send you one. It's like got support lumbar on the back. It's got pockets. It's just like a mom friendly product, right? Yeah. And we were going to put the baby carrier on this billboard, and I was having a shower, and I usually have great ideas in the shower. And we were like, we just did a photo shoot, and one of our models wanted to have like maternity photos, like pregnant, naked. And I was like, we need to amplify mothers. Yeah. And I was like, let's not do product focused. Let's just put a mother on a pedestal. Yeah. And we did this billboard, and she was naked in black and white, pregnant up there. And I was like,
stunning.
I was the most proud of that, because that had nothing to do with the product. Yeah. And it was like, women just are goddesses, and they should be put on a pedestal. Like when pregnant,
the creatrix energy just is like,
it's just like, that's the moment. It's so beautiful. Yeah. I would love to hear from you about some wisdom from our guests, something that you'd love to share it could be related to pregnancy and childbirth or not at all, but some words of wisdom that you think will be valuable for our guests on their journey. So something that you would love to share.
My journey of motherhood. I mean, really simply, like something that's been so loud and clear for me as of recent is just really allowing our children to be not just a teacher, but like a guide, you know, because I feel like people say all the time, like children are here to teach us, you know, and they definitely are, because they are like mirror reflection of us, and we see so much of our good and bad habits in them, you know, at all times. And it's like something that I've noticed is my daughter always, like, it's not like she's asking me to do this, but when I see her take on a trait of mine that is destructive, you know, not conducive for her well-being, I'm like, oh, it's time to do some work on that for myself, you know? And it's like just allowing our children to be the medicine that they are, you know?
So instead of like condemning them for anything that's like you don't think is helpful, you're turning it back around on yourself and being like, how am I modeling this behavior? Wow, that's really powerful.
Right. And it's like having a child is so challenging. And we touched on like challenges, and every time something feels challenging, especially within parenthood, it's like an invitation to grow more, to open more, and like I think it's funny because challenges are not necessarily always presented in ways that we expect them. Like sometimes we choose challenges, you know, like going on a family road trip is a challenge with the kids. And it's like, this might be stressful, but we know this, and we're going to take on this challenge and we're going to face it with optimism. Right. But then when a challenge comes and blindsides us, like, you know, our kid is having a tantrum all of a sudden, or like it's been a really long day and we're just having a really frustrating interaction where they're being defiant. They don't want to listen to us. It's like, those are the moments where we really get to see, where am I on my path? Like, where am I on my evolution? Because that's when the reactionary aspect of ourselves will come out, you know, like, what have we cultivated habitually, you know, because it's not easy to respond to challenges like in a balanced way consciously, but it's easier to do it when you're aware that the challenge is coming, you know? Versus like when you're just kind of not expecting it, then that, you know, habitual tendency will show up first. And it's like, do I have the capacity in this moment to like take a break, take a pause, take a breath, and respond in a way that is conducive for the well-being of everyone in this situation, you know? And it's like, children really allow you, they give you opportunities 1,000,000 times a day for that.
They do.
Yeah.
So what are tricks or hacks that you use to really like facilitate that? Yes.
Redirection is so key in many situations. Now, it doesn't always work, but most of the time it works, you know, because like when I notice for myself, like when my daughter is doing something that is just inherently dangerous, or that she, like, for example, she has a tendency to like really like to just play so rough with my husband and like just totally like jump her whole body on him. And it's like, you know, he can handle it for a bit, but it's really a lot, you know? And so in those moments, I understand why she's doing this, because initially when she first started this, when she was little, it was like cute and it was funny. And like the reaction we gave her prompted her in her mind to do it again, because she likes the reaction that, you know, she gets from it. And so now it's a little more challenging because she's like, you know, capable of really physically hurting him, you know, and she doesn't fully grasp that. And so in those moments like that, like a redirection that I'll do is like, oh, did you know that one of your stuffed animals was looking for you? Do you think that you can find them? They wanted to have some playtime, you know? Awesome. And it's just like, because children, they're so present all the time and they let go of things so easily. They move through emotions quite, you know, smoothly, and they're able to like, being present is where we find joy, and children know that really innately. And it's like one moment I was upset, next moment I'm not, because I'm here now, you know? And so it's like children are always just seeking to stay within this play, you know, life is joyful, life is pleasurable, life is exciting for them. And it's like, even in the moments where they might be doing something that is not like, okay. They're just seeking more of that playfulness, you know, and it's like when we allow ourselves to get frustrated, there's like an energy of, you know, like authority that can come into it, or just like shaming and just like general upset with them. And all we need to do really is remind ourselves to return to playfulness. Like, how can I soften here?
Yes.
Like, how can I just, it's
music.
okay.
I think music really helps, and singing. Speaking of the sound of music.
Yes.
I've heard that to be really helpful for parents when they're frustrated and they're like at a tipping point, is just to play music.
Yeah.
Have a dance party, get the energy out of your body, or sing, like just sing to your child or your baby. It's like, that's a really helpful redirection for parents, maybe. It's like when you're frustrated, it's like, just sing it out, put music on. Really, really helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just like, also I noticed with myself is like, we've been, in the midst of all of our moving, like I've noticed a great fluctuation in the amount of screen time that we've been allowing my daughter to do. And I notice, like, for the past couple of weeks, I've been really actively just like, what if I just choose presence instead? You know, like, what if I just choose simplicity and I just choose to be here? And really, I find that it's like letting go of this false sense of urgency, you know, like this has to be done like now, or like it has to be like completed in this way, or like if I don't do it on this timeline, like, you know, tomorrow morning is not going to be as smooth. And like, what if I just actually drop in with my child and just take a moment to connect with them?
Yeah.
You know, and it just always makes everything much more smooth.
For sure.
You know, like that's all they want. They just want us.
Yeah. They want presence.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was so awesome to talk to you today. It was a really beautiful experience. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. I'm so excited for your journey ahead.
Thank you.
Let us know how we can be of service to you, because we are here to serve.
Thank you.
And do you want to tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes. So really the best place to find me is just my Instagram. That's my most active mode of, you know, outreach to the world. And it's just THE, the Sydney Porter. So just my name. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. No, the conversation has been beautiful and uplifting and insightful and all of the best things that, you know, I feel like connection can bring. So
for sure.
Yeah.
What a gift. I want to do like 5 more episodes with you. Thank you for listening to the Village podcast, where we share unique stories, normalizing conversations and experiences in pregnancy, childbirth, postpartum, and motherhood. We are here to serve, and we really want to hear from you. So feel free to share, comment, like, and subscribe to keep this village growing. We are eternally grateful for you being with us and sharing space today. Until next time.